Thank you for making it all the way up to Karma. I hope it wasn't too hard to find. We're delighted to have Roy Pertchik and his Tri-Chromatic keyboards here, and they sound wonderful. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So, thank you, Sasha, so much for helping this come to be, and thanks to Julius also, who was open to this presentation over a year and a half ago. And thanks to Karma for this amazing facility. And thanks for everybody for coming down. I know a few of you have come long distances, and that's really amazing. So, I am going to try to describe the gist of the idea of this instrument and this system of harmony. I promise you it's really complicated. That's because music is complicated. The intention I had when I designed this instrument and then the system I use over the years was to try and make music more intuitive, so something that's visual, that's clear diagrammatically, and that's what this is about. I have one more huge thank you to give, which is to Barry Harris, who's an amazing old-time jazz player. He's in his 80s now. I saw him recently in San Francisco. And a lot of what I worked on here comes from Barry's teachings, which he evolved out of music from Bud Powell, Lenny Tristano. A bunch of people have this kind of harmonic system, and Barry had taught it for years in New York. And I would not be on the path I'm on with music had I not been exposed to what Barry does. So, grateful to him. So this is, you heard me playing a little bit before. It's this. It's classical jazz harmony. I'm not trying to do squeak and scratch music or, there's all sorts of other schools of music. But this is, I'm going to start with what people in traditional jazz music theory refer to as 1-4-5 chord progressions. And that's the basis of this system, and a whole lot of music comes out of that. And then that's going to be the focus of what I talk about. But this system can be used to access a whole lot more, and I'll give you a little taste of that too. But I'm going to show how this all hangs together. So I've given a handout, which you found on your chairs, and I promised a few of you who came earlier that there's no homework, it's just a handout. And there's a written part, and I'm going to try and follow this outline pretty much, because I think it helped me understand, just to write it actually, kind of helped me understand what I was thinking. And then there are 3 diagrams that accompany the written text. And these 3 diagrams, each one, there's one each for what I mentioned before, the 1, the 4, and the 5. And I'll tell you what the 1 and the 4 and the 5 means in a little while. But that's what's on this handout. So a summary of the topics, and then diagrams of how 1, 4, and 5 work. Okay, so take a sip of water. So nobody's going to be able to go out of here and play this instrument, but I hope you get the gist of what I'm talking about. So first I'm going to describe the instrument. This is a isomorphic keyboard, which means that the notes are laid out in a way that's kind of graphically looks like what you think you're going to hear. So, for example, you go from left to right, and it goes from low to high, And in more detail, and in distinction from a traditional keyboard, this layout is completely even. It's a uniform layout. It's all half steps. Each of these notes, you can see them up there. They're are 12 divisions of the scale. I'm dealing only with tempered tuning, and I'm going to be jumping back and forth a little bit about not being sure of what knowledge I can presume everybody has. So I'm going to say something like a tempered tuning, and some of you will know what that is, but I'm going to try not to digress too much because there's a lot of stuff here. So this is the key feature is that this is a uniform field of notes. There's no quirkiness to it. If you've ever looked at a piano and you've seen that there's 3 black notes and 2 black notes and a bunch of white notes on the bottom, you may wonder why it was set up that way. And there was a good reason it was set up that way, but it results in all sorts of quirky patterns. And so this keyboard is laid out all in even half steps. And what happens is that when you get a pattern that you like, for example, if you like the sound of a particular, you discover that's a shape I like, and you can just play that in different places, and it always sounds good, and it always sounds the same. That's not going to happen on a normal piano. The other thing about this instrument is that I've marked the notes in 3 colors. The 3 colors represent the diminished chords. The diminished chords are the scary Halloween sounding chords, like. There are 3 of those. There's the red ones, there's the white ones, and there's the black ones. So that divides the whole musical spectrum into 3 categories. And that's a key point. When I say diminished chord, that's going to come up a lot. What that refers to is that the distance in musical terms, or the interval from this note to this note, from black to black, is a minor third. It means you go, you make that sound. And if you do that over and over, you get a diminished chord. On the white notes, or on the red notes, you get 3 diminished chords. Okay. That's all there are, because there are 12 notes in an octave, right? So an octave is from same note, but higher and lower, right? That's an octave, and you can have 4 notes in this red diminished chord, and then you get back to the same note. So once you have 4, you have them all, right? Okay. And so there are 3 groups: the red, silver, and black, and 3 times 4 is 12. That's all there are, because there are 12 notes in the scale. If you were really fast, you counted out as 12. Okay. Okay. So there is, I'm going to define a scale. How are we going to build a scale? We're going to build a scale with the same method, or in a carefully defined way. We're going to take a diminished chord, which is, say for example, these red notes. And you'll notice that in between each red note, there are 2 other notes. There's a black one and a silver, black and a silver one. And what we're going to do is we're going to choose one of those other notes in between each of the notes of the diminished chord. So between these 2 notes, I'm just going to choose this one. And between these notes, I'm going to choose this one. There are 2 choices. I'm going to choose this one. So far I have. And then between these 2, I'm going to choose this one. And between these 2, I'm going to choose this one. And then we're back to the beginning again. Okay? So that's the way I'm going to build scales. You're going to take a diminished chord, and you're going to pick other notes that fit in between. And that's how you build a scale. And this is called the major 6 diminished scale. And it has 2 components, the diminished chord and the other notes in between. And that's called the 6. It's just what it's called. It's called a major 6 because it has this sound here, which is a major third, 1, 2, 3, they call that a third. And then it has this note and this note, that's 1, 3, 5, and 6. If you count up the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 3, 5, 6. Right? A lot of coding to this, but like I said, just get the gist of it. Right? So this is one chord, and in between those notes are the diminished notes. And if I move up again, I get the first one, but just sort of flipped over. And then if I move up again, I get the diminished one, just kind of flipped over, and then and so forth. So basically I can move a structure up and down this scale, picking out every other note each time, and I'll get either 4 diminished notes, or I'll get 4 of those other notes that I chose. Is this making sense? Everybody with me? Okay, good. Okay. And you get these sounds that are quite nice. With a little practice, you can learn to move around this scale. Now, this is different than the normal scale because it has 8 notes and 2 categories of notes. It has the diminished and it has the major 6. If you try to do the same thing on a normal scale, that scale normally has 7 notes. And so you get these changing patterns. Like each of those chords has a different name, it has a different quality, it's used in a different portion of the harmony of a song, and it's cumbersome to move around a scale that way. That's why you hear a lot of people play music like this. They go. Then the strumming chords are just kind of like staying static in one place. And the idea of this system is that you can move freely around the scale. Okay, I cheated, I snuck in another scale there. So this scale facilitates movement. That's a major idea there. How does it do that? Okay. So you have these diminished notes and you have these major 6 notes. So just taking the diminished, I want to talk about those 2 groups, the diminished and the major 6. There are properties of both of those groups. Okay, taking the diminished. Here's a red diminished. If I take one of those notes and drop it down, so I've taken this one, and I've dropped it to here. I still have these other 3 diminished notes. I get this sound which is called, it's called a 5 chord. It's called a 5 chord because in this original scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it starts on the 5th note. And it has this little sort of triangle of reds over here. And that's called a dominant 7th chord or a dominant chord. And in music, I don't know if anybody can actually explain this, but we always feel when we hear this that it wants to go here. I call it sit down, right? This music is... And there's a spectacular amount of music, Beethoven and rock and roll, and thousands and thousands and thousands of songs that are based on sit down. Sit down. This is a little bit of tension, and we don't know what's going to happen next. Oh yes, we do. It's just sat down. Okay, so that comes out of the diminished scale. There's the diminished chord. There's the diminished, and I just lowered one note, and I got this other one. Right? Okay. It turns out that every time you lower one of these notes in a diminished chord, if you lower it, the one on the bottom, you're going to get this sound, but you get it in different places on the keyboard, right? So it'll sound a little differently, but if you just look for this shape that I'm making here, you'll see that I'm going to get the same shape again. It has this 1, 2, 3 over here, and then a little triangle. We'll see how that comes out again. So here's a diminished chord, and now I'm going to move this one down here. same notes, and then I'm going to drop this down to there, and now I've got the same shape. Look, it's like that, and in a little triangle, it's just been flipped over, right? So this is the same as this, it's just flipped over. And then I can do the same thing again. I can go over here and drop this one over there, and I get another dominant 7 chord, dominant 5 dominant chord. It's got a lot of different names. And I can do it in one more position right here. I can go like that. So it turns out by taking the diminished chord and dropping one note at a time, you find 4 dominants. Bear with me, this is going to get simple in a minute. And the 4 dominants are like, and these are related to each other musically. You can do things, what you can do with one, you can do with another. And these are a family of dominants. This is the family of dominants using the red diminished chords. And so, for example, in this earlier part of the talk, I talked about the major 6th chord interlaced with these dominants, right? And I talked about sit down. Okay, so here's, if I take the diminished and the notes of this scale and I emphasize the 5, I get that sit down sound sort of automatically. So I'm just going to take notes from this scale and whoosh them around in the reds. So you can pretty randomly just grab notes out of the scale and the diminished, emphasize a little more of the diminished, and then hit that. And it sort of makes sense, right? Now I'm going to do the same thing, but instead of hitting this one, I'm going to hit this one. This is the one that goes with this one. So, that's a pretty jazz sound, right? And all I've done is I'm still using the same notes of the scale. I'm just going to now suddenly emphasize this one and add this one to the set instead of this one. And that's pretty easy to find because it was right here was black, and now here's black over here, right? So instead of playing this guy, I'm playing this guy. So that's pretty interesting. So you get that groovy sort of jazz sound. It's called a tritone substitute. You substituting for this one, and they're related to each other. These dominant chords are related. They all come out of the red diminished. I'll pull up the red diminished. Okay, now. Those are the 2 that are on this side of the keyboard. There are 2 up here. And before I get to those 2, I want to talk a little bit about the major 6. That's the other chord that's interlaced between the diminished. That was this one. That has 2 versions. Now, for people who are into programming, I'm hoping that one of the things that comes out of this whole system is the usefulness of having A-B choices all the way through this harmonic system. Well, one of the things when you as I understand designing an interface, you make sliders that go from this parameter moves along this continuum, or you have switches that go from A to B where you condition A or B, and you hold down a key or let go of a key, and it does something to the music. So with this system of music, there's a whole lot of A-B choices that you can make to get different harmonies. And so in an interface design, something that might be gestural or might be knobs or keys or blah, 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 you make a lot of A-B choices. So the first A-B choice we made was between the major 6th and the diminished, right? That's one or the other. Right? The second example of an A-B choice was I said, here's the 5 chord, and here's the tritone substitute. So another either-or choice. And these are opportunities, I think, for some interface design. So I want to now just continue on. I said I was going to go to the major 6th and tell you something about that. It has an A-B choice as well. So here's the sort of familiar position for the major 6th I started with before. that's sort of like the happy mode, the happy sound of music, you know. Okay, now I'm going to do the same, and that was because I picked this dominant chord made you feel like sit down, and you went there. Okay. There's another one from this red diminished, which is up here, and still the same red notes, and here's that bottom note for it, dropped, and that one is going to make you feel like sit down again, but it's going to be on a real bad day. It's going to be sad when it happens. It's going to be... Exact same notes. I'm just emphasizing 1, 2, 3, the third note, this black note here. And it makes the same exact set of notes. See, if I started here, that has one feel to it. If I started here, it's a different feel. That's called the minor mode, and people associate that with sadness and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so again, another A-B choice, right? We had the happy sit down, and then we have the sad sit down. Right? The major 6 has 2 modes, the minor mode and the major mode. And this dominant on the 3, 1, 2, 3, it also has a tritone substitute. We can move that down here. So that also has an A-B choice. So 4 dominants in the diminished chord, organized with A-B choices that lead you to 2 specific places in the major 6 chord. Wow, that's a whole lot of information. I need a sip of water. Like I said, I don't expect anybody to be able to recreate this for yourself, but I hope this train of thought has been clear enough that you can feel like the gist of it is comprehensible. Okay. A little bit more about the major 6th scale is that if you look for this shape, this major 6, which is an interval this, like 1, 2, 3, and then a diagonal 1, and then 2 right next to each other, right? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 3, 5, 6, right? You could ask the question, where else does this exact pattern occur in the scale we're talking about? The scale we're talking about is... just like do, re, mi, but there's an extra note. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, da, da, da. There's this extra note from the diminished. Okay, so the question is, where does this shape reoccur in the scale? And the answer I'll give you is that it reoccurs in 2 more places. It reoccurs on the 4th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, and on the 5th note. All of these notes are in that first scale. And all of these notes never violate the pattern of the first scale. So the major 6 can be built on the 1, the 4, and the 5. Okay, here's the finale of this insane train of thought. Thank you for going this far. So the first position takes the red diminished. That fits in between there nicely. The second position, which is on the 4th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, the diminished chord that fits in between there are the black notes. The first one takes the reds. second one takes the black. And guess which one fits on the fifth position? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth position takes the white ones, right? Okay. So now we have all three diminished chords are related back to the original key via the 1 major 6, the 4 major 6, and the 5 major 6. There are three families. They're each organized with a diminished chord and a major 6 chord. And all of those diminished chords include a dominant on each of its note by dropping one. So you have 3 times 4, all related back to the original key, which is here. So it says that there's a useful and organized way of relating a dominant chord from anywhere on the keyboard back to 1 by making these A-B choices, by choosing which category you're picking from. Is it going to be the 5 or the 3, or is it going to be the 5's tritone substitute or the 3's tritone substitute? And what I just described, all of that is the structure of the harmony that I used to play my romance earlier. So that's the major 6 on the 1. Now this is the diminished on the 5. Okay, so 5 major 6. You know, people say, how can that be a major chord? It sounds so screwy. But here are the notes in the major chord. And if you start emphasizing the diminished instead of emphasizing the major, you get... Okay, so my romance... Back to 1. So that was 5 and it's diminished, and 1 and it's diminished. And it gives you all this juicy sounds just in this sort of simple system. Simple, 1,000 words to describe it, and simple once you kind of see it. I left out the 4. I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to put the 4 in there. This is the 1. This is the 5. Now this is the 4. Now this is, I'm going to reverse it. I'm going to play the diminished for the 1. So I went, in the beginning I went, here's the major 6 with the reds. Now this is the 5 with the silvers. Now here's the 4 with the blacks. Now here's the reds for the 1. Version of the 1, but it's still the reds. And then here's the blacks on the 4. See, you find these little things that play around with these black notes. I don't have to think to myself A flat or an F or B or how to convert or how to spell. I just go, here's 3 black notes. And this was a black note, I just dropped it down. There's a silver, so I just play with this hand, a silver and a black one, and this 2 black ones. That's, I hope that was clear. Okay, so that's 1, 4, and 5. Are the organizers of the major 6th half of this. Well, the diminished has a dominant 7, a dominant 7, a dominant 7, a dominant 7. It's 3 worlds. And 3 times 4 is 12. That's all the possible dominant 7 relationships related all back to the first note of the first chord, which is what we call the 1. And sometimes people will say, yeah, but there's a whole lot of other music that's not 1, 4, and 5. And that's true. And so this completely includes that kind of music as well as a bossa nova called Triste. Okay, so that was a move from here to here. It's just an expansion of the system. It's just an extrapolation of the same system. I started on the one with the reds. And now I'm on this one. It takes the black notes. And so you don't have to play 1, 4, 5. You can play anything really, but it's easier to explain how inclusive it is if you start with 1, 4, 5. If I realize I've completely ignored my diagrams, but here they are. The first one is B major 6 diminished, B flat major 6 diminished. And if you look at this diagram, you'll see that there's a squiggly pair of lines that runs through it, and those are enclosing the notes that are part of this scale. So reading across the top, you see there's a big Roman numeral 1. That stands for the 1 of the chord. When I was counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that 1 is where that 1 is. It's on that. It's just above that silver gray spot. And then to the right of that is a red 1, and that's the first diminished note. You see that all of the red ones are enclosed in this sort of snaky pattern. And if you continue to the right, you get to a black note, and that's surrounding the red note. And then you kind of go diagonally down. And those are the notes that I was talking about, 1, 3, 5. 1, 3, 5. And then there's another one, the next one is 6. That's the major 6. And then the red ones are the diminished right next to it, interlaced in between. And then I've got to the major 6 condition again. I've just moved this note up to here. So this is a diagram, the first page, B flat major 6. This note happens to just be B flat. I can tell you, I have different names for the notes, but I don't think I'm going to bring that up today. So there you have it. That's all the different sounds in the B flat major 6. It says 5 dominant on the 5th note. That's the dominant guy that I was talking about before. And then it says 3 dominant over here. So this diagram shows those relationships on the B flat major, which is the first note of this do re mi scale. And then the next page shows E flat major 6, and if you count up on the first page, 1, 2, 3, 4, you get to that next red note. That's the E flat major. This is the diagram of the chord of the scale, the same scale built on the 4th position. And you'll see now the black notes are the diminished chord that's enclosed in the lines. And the 3rd page shows the F major 6 diminished, and the little snaky diagram is just moved over one more notch, and now the silver gray notes are the notes that are enclosed in this diagram. So this is a summary of 1, 4, and 5 in sort of an illustrated fashion. I think I should open this up to questions and thoughts, and see what people are thinking about what I've been talking about so far. So, any questions or comments? Hey, Aris.
Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering if you've seen this system realized in any other medium, or if you try to do any kind of programming with it.
Yes, I'm excited about the possibility of doing some programming with it. The exposure I've had to the system came from studying some jazz harmony with Barry Harris years ago in the 80s. And he was able to do this on a conventional piano. And I tried for 10 or 15 years to memorize enough of it to be able to do it on that quirky piano. And I finally said, I think I'm going to build a different instrument. Which is, I designed this, a fellow in Holland built it for me, Nico van der Plas, did a great job. I have only just scratched the surface programming-wise. Tim Thompson and I worked on an interface design which was gestural, and we got some of these sounds to come out of it. I hadn't quite... Tim asked me a fantastic question. He said, why are some moves in music different than other moves in music? Why aren't there just 12 different things you can do? And I didn't know how to answer him at the time, but my answer to him is this talk, is to say, the first choice is a three-part choice, 1, 4, 5, 1, 4, 5, 4, 5, 1, whatever, choose between those things. The second choice is major, minor, A, B, A, B, A, B. The third choice is the dominant or the tritone substitute. So you pick these categories, you make these A-B choices. It's a cheat because 3 is not A-B, it's A-B-C. We'll have to get a computer that can handle a three-way choice. But you make these categorical choices, and they're big, major structural ones, and then there are refinements, and they're more subtle, right? And by organizing it this way, I think there will be some terrific opportunities to make interfaces that'll hopefully, you make a couple of choices and then wave your hand or rub across a ribbon or something, and it'll make a cluster of notes, and then you'll step on the tritone substitute pedal for a little bit, and it'll sound really groovy, and then you'll let it up, and then it'll sound normal, and then you'll hit this thing that makes it resolve back to what? Making music. So, I want to take the computation part off the shoulders or off the brain of the guy who's doing it. You'll have to know a little bit about music and what you're trying to harmonize with, but you won't have to memorize all those scales, I hope. We shall see. It's a good question. Any other thoughts, or how can I?
Diminished chord does not define a tonality. It is labile.
I'm sorry?
Labile. A diminished chord is, it doesn't have a tonality. It can go any which way.
That's true.
It needs to have another note added to it, as you have mentioned in the major chord.
That's right. Yeah, it's very ambiguous by itself.
You can do different things as well. For instance, in Bartók's music, as analyzed by a guy who came long after Bartók died, Enno Envoy, who defined Bartók's music in terms of what's called the alpha chord, which is have 3 notes of the diminished and add a fourth to it. So like C, E flat, G flat, B. That defines a tonality.
Yes, it does. So that comes out of, yes, good example. So that's, what did you say, C, E flat,
so
G flat, and a B.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So out of the diminished, if I started this diminished and I flip this note up here, and I flip this note up here, and I do it one more time, I'm here, and one more time, now I'm here. Okay, now I drop this one note down, and you'll find that that's the same notes that you just spelled. So it's a juicy, beautiful, that's a beautiful B flat, B7. And I'll show you how that you might use that. You might use it. So that Bartok stuff is in here. It's interesting. Yeah. And I'm not familiar with the analysis that you're describing.
So the guy's name is named by L-E-N-D.
L-E-N-D. Interesting. Yeah.
It exists.
There's so many ways to look at music and listen to, figure out how to categorize it. Right now, this is the simplest, most organized system I've ever come across. And I don't want to make a foolishly bold claim like it encompasses everything, because I know it certainly doesn't. But I think it includes that sound that you just described, as that would be the tritone substitute of the five and diminished to my ear. But I should listen to the piece you're talking about. Yes.
So one of the cool things here is that transposition is trivial almost, right?
That's true. Right.
And I mean, you could play, if you ask somebody to play My Romance that knows it in C and then ask them to play it in E instead, it would be a mess. But for
Yes,
you,
it's much easier.
colors change or something?
It's not completely trivial. It's much more trivial. Why can't I do this? Yeah. But I played this song many times, so I always think to myself, go to the red, go to the black. So you can throw yourself off. What's interesting about transpositions is that since it's a completely symmetrical system, you can learn the rotation. So for example, if it goes silver, black, red, and then you start over here, you go black, red, silver. You know that red always follows black, black always follows silver, silver always follows red. You learn these rotations basically. I'll tell you what the names of the notes really should be, and you can laugh if you like. It's Be, Re, Y, Bo, Re, Be, I, Ro, Way, Be, Ri, Wo, Be. Okay, so what's going on there is the consonant at the beginning is rotating through three possibilities, black, red, and white. And the vowel is rotating through four possibilities, A, E, I, and O. And that gives you every combination, permutation. If you were to substitute zeros and ones and twos for the first three, and 0, 1, 2, and 3 for the other one, you get this really cool base 3, base 4 sort of nomenclature for the thing. All the digits rotate in a completely symmetrical way, and they're all manipulable by modular arithmetic, I think. I don't know enough about it to really know how to do it.
Okay,
but
there you are.
there they are. Thank you. And that's an area I want to explore. Let's. Yeah.
So half of them you have to do this mirror operation.
That's true. Right.
But you could go stand on the other side.
Yeah.
Or I could go through Alice's looking glass, drink the milk, and have the reverse proteins. Yeah. One of the reasons I like playing the vibraphone sector is that the guy who was widely known for trying a chromatic system before was Janko, and he built the pianos with several rows so that he could keep his hand always in the same position when he moved, to new rows. It's a very complicated thing to build. Paul is working on one. But being a vibraphone player, it's a whole lot easier. It's just, my fingers can't do that flipping back and forth thing, but the sticks make it a lot easier. So, Tim, what were you going to say?
On your point about the transposition, if the bars could change color dynamically, and then shift it, would that then make it trivial For you, in other words, it sounded like you were,
Yeah, yeah, my
and-
mind
and
is
that actually-
poisoned by a little bit of static conditioning.
and when you're explaining things, it's hard for your, at least for my mind, to switch from seeing the red ones as a pattern versus seeing the white ones and
Yeah,
flipping.
yeah.
I mean, that can become natural, but if those colors could change dynamically,
Yes, yeah. So maybe an interface that gives you 3 positions and that would cover it.
The Terpstra keyboard that we're getting will be able to change the colors programmatically of the keys in exactly that sort of way. So,
So we'll have a chance to
Yeah.
experiment with that. And you know, it's interesting, the power of this, the enticement of easy transposition catches a lot of people's attention, in particular because learning to play in 12 keys is an ordeal. It's just really a very, very huge hurdle. A lot of musicians or people who want to play music begin to learn some these alternate fingerings, and then they hear these arcane spellings, A flat, G sharp, and why does it have 2 different ways? What do you mean B sharp, sharp? Oh my God, you know. It gets, the amount of memorization needed to get in the game enough to start to understand the patterns is just, it turns a lot of people off. A lot of kids quit piano after 3 or 4 weeks. And so when we look at this and we go, wow, I could transpose so easily, or when you have a first synthesizer, I bought the X7, you know, you could tweak it and go, ooh, I'm in a new key, it's great. Irving Berlin, by the way, had a handle on the side of his piano. He could retune his piano to different keys. He could only play in 1 key. But I think the real significance of this system is this 1-4-5 and exploitation of the symmetry between the 1, the 4, and the 5. They're the same shapes. Each one takes its own diminished, and each diminished has 4 dominants in it. And when you organize the dominants that way and say one of those dominants is on the 5, that takes you to the 1. The other dominant is on the 3, that takes you to the minor. It's the 6, the minor. And the other 2 dominants in that family are the tritone substitutes for each of those. All of that happens on 1, 4, and 5. And once you learn that, you can play 2/3 of the real book.
And if you learn it in 2 positions, the upper register and the lower register, you've got them all.
Right.
Yeah.
If you play vibraphone, that's not too hard.
Yeah.
Yes?
I'm still trying to translate your keyboard into keyboards I am more familiar with.
That's right.
But you can play the Debussy by just doing a glissando on one of the keyboards.
It's a whole tone scale.
Yes, that's Debussy. Right. And also the 3 colors represent for classical music. The 3 modes, if you like, the tonic, dominant, and subdominant.
Yes.
So if the tonic is which one was the B flat you chose?
Here's a B flat.
Okay, well, so that's the tonic, and the dominant is going to be black.
Yes, here it is the
And
5.
subdominant is going to be red.
The what?
Subdominant is going to be red.
I'm not sure which you're referring to,
Yes.
the subdominant.
The
but-
4th.
Fourth.
Yes, okay, yes.
So you can substitute the notes in each and create the same sensation of from tonic, dominant, and then from any, for instance, from any red, I'm sorry, from any black, you will expect to go back to the silver in some ways. So that's going home.
Yes, I think I know what you're talking about, because that. Yeah, the sit down. That's from 5 to 1. Yes, right. And in classical music, they talk about 4-5-1. In jazz, a lot of people talk about 2-5-1. And
Same.
It's the same, thank you very much. And so this is really interesting, so, to me. The 4, I don't know your name, sir. I don't know your name, sir. Is it
Pierre.
Pierre. Pierre mentioned that the 4 and the 2 are the same. That means, here's the 4 major 6. It's 4, and then I pretend for a second, I count up from the 4. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the 4 of this key, 1, 2, 3, 4, major 6. Okay. Pierre noticed that this was the same notes as the 2 minor of the original key. What that means is, if I went to the original key and went 1, 2, and I play these 4 notes, those are every other note in the original key. That's called a 2 minor. It's a minor sound, and it's built on the 2, and it's the same exact notes as the 4 major 6. Okay? But what's key about this system that I'm talking about is when I go to the 4 major 6 and look for the diminished that fits in between, it's the black notes. So I can play around. Now I'm going to play the diminished for the 1, which is the red notes, and see the ambiguity because the 4 is a red note, as he pointed out. So I'm going to turn it into a diminished, and now I'm actually in the first key of the first one. So I use the 2 diminished to go first. I can stay in 4 as long as I want. You see, a lot of people want to stay on the 4, so they keep hitting the 4. Right? And that's a lot of people learn to play the guitar. They strum the same chord for a while, then they strum it over here for a while, right? But they don't get that movement going on. And the nice thing about the black diminished on the 4 is that I can just sustain it, kind of play around for a while, and then go to the reds. You use the diminished to kind of add color and make the chord do things for a while before you go on to the next chord. So, yeah.
So it seems like, in addition to proposing a new way of laying out keys and thinking about things just spatially with respect to the isomorphism of the keyboard, transposition and such,
Right.
you're also proposing a sort of new way of looking at tonal harmony, or a way of emphasizing an aspect of tonal harmony that's not the main emphasis in your music theory textbooks.
Yes, right. I would describe it this way. I've taken a very old way of doing it, which I attribute to Barry and Bud Powell, so 40s and 50s. And I've analyzed it in a way that's more graphical. And then I've invented an instrument that lets you get at that stuff. And then I've taken their thing and learned it as best as I could. And formalized it a little bit. For example, one of the results my nephew came up with, the question was, okay, if you take this diminished, and you can choose 2 notes in between each diminished to form a scale, and I came up with the major 6 diminished earlier on. I just arbitrarily selected that because it's the most useful one. The question became, how many ways can you do that? How many unique ways you can do it? And it's an astoundingly small number. It's 5. There are only 5 unique scales built this way. I think the term is plotzed when I heard it. I couldn't believe it. And of those 5, 2 are hugely, cover a tremendous amount of music. One is the major 6, the other is the minor 6. It's a minor triad with a 6th note. That sound is, called pure minor. There are 3 other ways to combine notes. One in there, you can stick another diminished chord in between there. that's useful. You can stick in what's called 2 augmenteds in there. It's also useful. This is real Debussy, La Mer, kind of like, you know. And then there's one more, which is the, oh, you can put a dominant 7 in between the diminished. And those are, you can throw those in places, right, in songs. You can also, there are other ways to connect this Tinkertoy system where you can take like a minor and stick it on the end of a dominant 7 and use it for that, and blah, blah. That's, I need more pages of diagrams, basically.
Yeah, it actually gets to, I think, what my question was going to be.
Okay.
You know, I'm very interested in the idea that you have the symmetrical structure, the fully diminished 7th chord that's kind of generating things, and that's calling back to the tritone substitution relationship we're familiar with from other jazz harmonies. What do you make of the other symmetrical and dominant functioning chord that we encounter a lot, the augmented chord? Do you see that? You see the augmented chord?
What is that word?
Augmented?
Oh, augmented, yeah, sure.
All the
yeah.
time in Western harmony.
Sure.
As an alteration on the dominant chord. It's also symmetrical in the same way as this.
Yes.
So if you apply the same logic towards constructing this theory or emphasizing this aspect of it,
Yeah.
you also see fruitful things when you approach it from that symmetry? You need another.
I look for other places where the augmented might come from. You can build this thing like around here, around these dominant notes. I can put an augmented, well, that's not exactly what you mean, but I find the augmented, for example, I mentioned that there's a dominant on the 5 in the scale, there's a dominant on the 3 in the scale. The dominant on the 3, the dominant on the 5 sounds like this, and the notes in between that are still in the scale are. So here, from here to here, these notes are all in it, and this note's in it. Then I go up here, and these are all together in it, and then down here, right? That's the one on the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the one on the 3, over here, 1, 2, 3, it has different notes in between, right? So instead of going, like this one goes at an angle up and then down again and continues across, this one doesn't go like that, it just goes. So the shape in between the notes is different, okay? So what's interesting is that I want to play this dominant, but this note is also in there. That's the 1 of the original key, so I go. So look at that, I can go. There's the augmented. That's the augmented. So it's just, the augmented is just another detail of the dominant on the 3. And what does that sound like? Let's say. Another way you can get that is, because I saw you frown for a second. The other way I get to it, and again, this is the, you know, I have 2 sisters who are wonderful composers, and my younger sister is a brute force composer. She just, it comes out of intuition. She knows, she teaches piano, she knows some structure, but the next thing she's going to play is just brute force, like, I think that sounds good. And she plays an augmented chord, and I can't explain where she gets it from, she just plays it. But I have this structure, this gets me to different places, and you know, it's what I can do. So one of the things I do for augmented sound is I say it comes out of the tritone. I could say, there's that, and this guy, the first one has this note, so if I take this note from the first guy and I use it with the second guy, that's a way to get the augmented. It's not so neat. I'll have to work on that.
Sorry. The augmented is also unstable because it has one of each color. So it can go any which way you want to.
That's true, that's true. But if we consider it as part of the 3, it will go somewhere.
Yes.
Yes.
So I wanted to comment on your your question, because what I see you doing here, Roy, is you span the musical space by going in 2 dimensions, because you could repeat this pattern, going up, adding more and more rows of bars,
True.
half step, half step.
Yes,
Then
yes.
you wouldn't have to do that flip, by the way.
That's
Because
right.
there'd always be another row up there. So then you enter into a family of Western musical representations, this 2-dimensional stuff. And all you need for that is to have a left-right interval and an up-down interval so that together they span the full space. And I think I sent you papers about this or something a while ago. But one thing you could do is pick major thirds to the right and minor thirds going up. And when you do that, you get, you get all sorts of different kind of geometries that you recognize Western music on. And stuff like that. Famous
Very
chord
true.
progressions become straight lines through the space. You play proximate triads. And I think a guy named Simon Holland gave a talk here about 10 years ago or something.
Right.
I don't know if anybody remembers that. But he had a computer screen. You press the dots, and they were, this 2-dimensional representations.
These guys do, it's a great question, and it's a topic I'm interested in. So there's the guys with the jammer keyboards, and there's different button arrays that are the B-type accordion and C-type accordions, I think they are, and different kinds of geometries. And I'm very interested in what people can do with them. It's interesting, I think, for example, the accordion music that comes out of that has a kind of flavor to the compositions. There's an ergonomic stuff that's convenient to do on that keyboard, and so it influences the style of music that's played on those 2 accordions. I started this talk saying that this is an isomorphic keyboard, meaning that as much as possible for me, I wanted the note layout to reflect what you hear when you make a move. So I like the fact that the half notes are right next to each other, and there's a huge intuitive, for me, benefit of being able to guess where the note's going to be. When I was a kid, I played the cello, and I was pretty good at landing on a note. Thinking about it, it's a spectacular thing that the human body and the interaction between your brain and your ear can predict where to squeeze a vibrating string, and you get really close to the pitch. It's pretty amazing. My sister plays violin, and she's got an unbelievable sense of pitch. And so, as much as I can benefit from that, even on this crude, bunch of bars to hit, I like it, and so that's just a pure bias. If I had to go like this to play half steps, which is what happens on some of these layouts, I'd go nuts, but maybe someone else would. And after 12 years, I can play this thing, and I can demonstrate that this system is powerful, because I think I can make some nice music. People clap at the end. When I hear a jammer guy who can do, some Bud Powell on it, I'll say, well, you like the system. I want to hear it. I think the proof is in the hearing it.
Yeah, a lot of those others, you're absolutely right, scales are kind of all over the place.
They're all over the map, and sometimes, and you do get nice music out of it, because it's kind of automatically gives you these interesting progressions by swiping your hand through it. But I'm not sure you get all that much control, or what there is an overhead of to it, but somebody could demonstrate some great music on it. I'd love to hear it.
I could elaborate on it. I just say the conclusion is that your gadget, it could be a teaching instrument for harmony, skipping over all the treatises that you've ever seen and that complicates your life if you want to get into it. Because harmony is actually very, very simple. And what you have demonstrated here is really that can be understood in 1 hour.
Right. Thank you. I hope that bears out over time. It is a good teaching instrument. There's a guy in Texas named David White, who's teaching. He's taken a regular keyboard and he's put 3 colors of dots in my system on there, and he's teaching kids to play there, and he's doing some interesting stuff. And there's a kid he's not a kid anymore, he's in his mid-late 20s in Germany, named Robert Dahl, who built him a vibraphone. He had Nico build him a vibraphone exactly like mine, and he's been playing And he teaches conventionally and on that, and he's having some pretty good success. I think there's some testing to be done. When I look at this, I have to say, my ability to immediately recognize a pattern and find it again, like I gotta hit A flat or B flat or whatever. Boom, it's so easy on the black and white keyboard. My brain can retain that, it's really easy. There's E flat, you know. Here I have to kind of think a little bit. There's a little more computational overhead going on, I admit that. Sometimes I hit wrong notes, and sometimes I can't quite tell these two red ones apart instantly, right? Because there's some ambiguity. The ambiguity gives me a huge leg up on finding harmony once I know the system, but it makes rapid playing a little bit more of a headache. So there's some testing to be done. I would love, for example, here's a plug. I have one of these, another one of these that's available. I'd love to install here at Stanford in a practice room and see what some of the percussionists do with it. And so I see Sasha is back there still. Shaking her head, no, not a good idea. We'll talk. There's one last thing, if anybody's interested in working on this. I do have a MIDI version of this thing working. Thank you much. I think we're there, right? We want to get time a second.
Thank you.